Okay, hello and welcome to class number 4, Shamatha calm abiding. We were last week discussing a bit about entering into jhana and just working with that practice. The course is about shamatha, cultivating a calm abiding within life. The jhanas are an extension of that. So oftentimes they're referred to as the shamatha jhanas, where that depth of concentration, that depth of focus begins to open up into deeper states of concentration. So let's go into that. Pressing. Okay, good. Here we are. Okay, so working with the jhanas, and this week I'd like to focus on just kind of reviewing again the jhanas, what this practice is, and just working with, the obstructive thoughts. So prior to starting the recording, we're having a bit of a conversation about householders engaging in this practice, and how there's a little bit of a minefield that we may be subject to that cloistered and sequestered monastics may not as much. Being that we are subject to so much more, um, how should we say, things in life that are creating and potentially feeding the various hindrances, the cravings, aversions, unconsciousness, restlessness, doubt. And that shows up oftentimes in just kind of the um, um, distracted mental state. So when we talk about getting into states of concentration, getting into states of absorption, there's always this problem of thinking that happens that we tend to relate to as a barrier. So this is one of the things that I'd like to explore this evening. So without further ado, so we're working with jhana. What is this? Without uh, um, a better translation, it's one of these words that are somewhat untranslatable. So oftentimes it's translated as a meditative absorption. So we talk about concentration, and concentration usually has this connotation of efforting, of striving of the mind, cracking the books, nose to the grindstone, that sense of forcing the direction of the mind. But uh, um, you know, a better word is absorption. There is this sense of, how shall we say, kind of a want, just in a way that we engage in an activity that we like, we become absorbed in it. Yeah. So you can tell that you watched a good movie or a good TV show because you were not painfully aware of the writing being faulty, or not being aware of time passing, or not being aware of the fact that actually your bladder needs to be emptied. When we're absorbed into the experience of the show or the movie, that's an absorption. There's this kind of loss of self in a way. When we're absorbed into a conversation, absorbed into whatever hobby or whatever activity that we really enjoy, there's this absorption. There's this sense of joyful unifying with the activity. Yeah. So this is something that we've all tasted here and there within our lives, but it probably didn't have that mindfulness quality where we're aware of it, where we're aware of awareness, so to speak, as it's partaking in this activity of being absorbed, and also not reflecting on what are the mental factors that are available to us. If we were to kind of just taste the experience of our mind, what are the subcomponent ingredients? So this is kind of what we're going to be working towards a bit in this. So jhana developed deepened states of concentration. So concentration is the word that we're commonly use. Absorption is probably a better. But it's that idea of concentrated focus. There's the suppression of the hindrances that happen. You know, one of the ways that Buddhism conceives of the experience of the mind at rest is concentration, or an absorbed state. And the rest is the absence of the hindrances, the absence of the craving, the aversion, unconsciousness, restlessness, doubt that are assailing and attacking the mind, so to speak. These are the things that are constantly coming up that are giving us this sense of dukkha, distress, dismay. So, inclining, training the mind to behave in a way that these afflictive mental factors begin to become subdued so that the mind can just kind of come to rest, settle, and stabilize. And the experience of that is a purified mental state. The mind feels purified. It feels unencumbered, unhindered, unafflicted. And so, as we were talking a little bit again before the recording, there's this placidity, nurturing relief that can be a sustained experience when we enter into this sort of practice that maybe the mind, the brain, the nervous system heretofore has not, hasn't experienced prior. And by extension, there's a learning that can happen. It's just like, oh, I see the flame. That's pretty. I touch it and I burn myself. I learned not to stick my hand in the fire. Similarly, the mind starts to, as we're engaging in this practice, this journey into cultivating jhana, the mind starts to become aware in very subtle ways of how it's creating affliction and how it can kind of withdraw from that to start to create the conditions for the mind to come to rest. So it's a purified mental state that can then become somewhat translatable. That doesn't mean that we're going to walk around life, drive the freeways in deep states of concentration and absorption, but the mind starts to learn to not get in the way of itself so much. You know? And of course, we have this increased faculty of concentration and single point focus and ability to rest our attention on an object that we find relevant to the exclusion of what is irrelevant. So when we later move in towards insight practice, vipassana practice, we have that these various levels of concentration become very powerful tools for us to engage in deeper mindfulness that can incline us towards wisdom. Yeah? That's the awakening component. So, Jhana, we're going to play around with it. So, Buddha would liken the untrained mind to essentially being lacking in concentration. And so the metaphor he uses is the mind is like a fish thrown on land, flapping about, just flailing around, unable to just stay on something. It's over here, it's over there. There's a sense of painfulness, there's a sense of distress and urgency that the brain is constantly being subject to. So compared to when we enter into these stages of concentration, he says, the mind in this stage is compared to a child who has just learned to walk. He takes a few steps, falls down, gets up, walks more, and falls down again. But the mind in absorption is like a man who wants to walk. He just gets up and walks straight ahead without hesitation. Do I have that here? Yes, I do. Actually, that is not the Buddha talking. That is Bhikkhu Bodhi from the Noble Eightfold Path in the section where he's talking about right concentration. So, what he's conveying here is, the earlier stages of when we're trying to concentrate, it's just like the child that's just kind of wobbly and stands up and falls down, stands up and falls down. But when we train ourselves to concentration, it's like it's something that's available and we just get up and do it. So it's a skill set. It's a skill set that can be cultivated. Um, so the jhana factors or the factors of absorption, when we look at, how shall we say, the factors, so what does that mean? The mental factors, I always come back to this metaphor of the chef tasting the soup, and just from tasting it can discern what are the ingredients that make up that sense of soup. So these mental factors, we're cultivating a palate to discern what are the ingredients of mind. These certain cetasikas, these certain, elements of mind, mental factors. There's not a wonderful, straightforward translation into English that I think said, oh yes, there's not a one-to-one translation here. but let's go through it and it might make more sense. So the quote, the jhanas are distinguished by way of their component factors. The first jhana is constituted by the original set of the 5 absorption factors. So when we're entering into jhana, there are these 5 elements, mental factors, ingredients that are present. There's the initial application of mind, or vitakka, the sustained application of mind, or vicara, rapture, piti, happiness, sukha, and one-pointedness, ekaggata. So these are kind of the main ingredients that we are experiencing subjectively when we are sitting to meditate. So the initial application of mind, that's the component of mind that lifts and places our attention. So we might have a sense of this when we're meditating. It's like, oh, I'm going to turn my attention to the breath. And there's some part of your mind or awareness that's just kind of lifting and placing your attention onto the breath. And then you might lose control of it. And then the part of the mind just takes your attention and inserts it into planning. And it's like, oh, no, wait, waking up. That's the mindfulness. And then the vitakka comes of like, all right, I'm picking up and placing the mind there. So that's what that means, vitakka, and application of mind. Then there's the sustained application of mind, vicara. That's the element of, that's the mental factor that correlates with anchoring your attention to the object. I'm bringing my attention to the breath, and there's a little bit of Velcro there. It's not like I'm putting it there and then like a 3-year-old, we just get up and walk away. No, there's some ability, there's some maturity to retain my attention onto that object, anchoring subject and object, anchoring the awareness, our attention to what we're focusing on. Then rapture, or piti. We talk about this here and there, trying to find metaphors that are relatable. That's, according to Bhikkhu Bodhi, the joy that accompanies a favorable interest in the object of focus. So we're looking at breath, and oftentimes I use that in my instruction of paying attention to the breath, but what are the pleasant qualities here? So the more that we can attune to the pleasant qualities, then it's like, oh, that's interesting. I want to continue in the next moment to be engaged in this way. Yeah. And by being engaged in this way, I'm kind of, there's a reciprocity. I'm kind of feeling um, that joyful quality of being interested in connecting with this object of focus. Yeah. So that's the piti. And I like that because a lot of times, piti is, well, there's the term rapture. Oh, that has some kind of like biblical transcendent connotation to it that, you know, not a lot of us can relate to. But it's something that becomes apparent, in more profound stages. There's this energetic quality that can arise within the body, this rapturous feeling. But I think for now, what is relatable, what is potentially available in most people's experience is being interested in something and experiencing the joy of the interest. So the more that we can apply our mind to the object of focus, for instance, breath, anchor our attention here, and allow ourselves to enjoy the pleasant qualities. Those are the instructions that we often get. And this is why it's helping us cultivate, reinforce, strengthen these habits of vitakka, vicara, piti, and sukha, or happiness. Happiness is that pleasant feeling that accompanies the successful concentration. So we're sustaining our efforts to stay connected, and there's this a rapturous feeling or the enjoyment of that. Um, and so to differentiate between the piti and the sukha, in his book, again, The Noble Eightfold Path, um, Bodhi cites Buddha as often referencing the difference between crawling through the desert and seeing an oasis, that's the excitement, versus finally drinking the water and being like, that's the joy, or the sukha. Yeah. So kind of that excitement versus contentment. Yeah. If we can kind of tease apart to have a little bit more contrasting elements there. And then the fifth one being ekaggata, or the one-pointedness. That's the unifying the mind with the object. Yeah. So subject and object merge. Yeah. There's the me that's paying attention to breath, and there's this you know a lifting of the mind, the applying of the mind, but then at a certain point there's this clicking into place, so to speak, or all the static that is there that's constantly trying to obstruct pull me away tends to go to fall away. And then there's this natural kind of unifying. I can just kind of stay with it, be with that experience. Um, so those are those qualities. Vitakka, vicara, piti, sukha, ekaggata. And you might say to yourself, wow, that's totally unrelatable. That's okay. It's just like riding a bike. If anybody can remember back to the experience of riding the bike, well, I have it broken down, vitakka and vichara. So it's like the vitakka is like, I remember actually the moments when the training wheels came off of my bike, and I'm just like, oh, okay, I'm kind of getting this, kind of getting this. Maybe I'm going to fall any moment. There's this kind of exhilarating feel there, and really paying attention to it. So it's like the riding the bike. There's part of us that's like, okay, I'm on top of the directions, on top of the handlebars, and I can kind of control it there. That's the application of mind, because there's some degree of agency of controlling. Yeah. And then the vichara, that sustained connection. It's just like in the next moment, I'm just so kind of riding that present moment, that I'm really kind of looking at the road, and I'm just kind of, kind of controlling and responding, controlling the bike and responding to it. That's the vitakka vichara piece. Yeah. That's something that we can relate to, hopefully. Then the piti sukha, that's a little bit more of kind of like the exhilaration of like, oh man, how long can I do this before I fall over? And there's that kind of excitement that happens. And then after a while, it's just like, oh, okay, cool, I got this. And then there's this, I'm enjoying riding the bike. That's cool. I'm enjoying this. This is fun. You know? And then ekaggata is kind of like, all right, well, the mind kind of gets over that novelty. This is like, oh, okay, cool. I've adapted to it now. Now I'm just kind of cool, and I'm not having to think about all of these different things. I'm just kind of hanging out, riding the bike. It's just an activity occurring. So we can look at this as kind of like, well, yeah, there's this kind of a little bit more like surface to depth experiences. And there's something about that, because as there's progressing through different jhanas, and the progressing through the different jhanas 1 through 4 is essentially, there's all these factors here. And then one by one, how can we kind of extract them? If the metaphor is the hot air balloon, we want it to get to kind of different stages of elevation. We have to kind of throw overboard a few sandbags. And so as we go through, progress through different stages of jhana, there's kind of, all right, how can we don't no longer need this application and anchoring of mind. It's naturally happening. Okay, we don't necessarily need the piti sukha anymore. So that's later on. But for right now, let's work with this riding the bike analogy. Okay, so great, Mike. This is awesome. It sounds amazing. Let's all get into these deep states of concentration and unification. But what about this crazy mind I have? Yeah. Thoughts will be thinking. It do be like that. Okay, so it's about, we're trying to just move in the direction of cultivating the qualities, cultivating the conditions for concentration to occur. How is it that we can kind of reduce the clutter, of the mind, the fantasy, the planning, the daydreaming, all of that occurring? So while cultivating the concentration, can we allow for a little bit of like a background practice? Yeah. So working through the mental activity, quieting the mind. So here's the thing. It's like, oh, I want to concentrate, but there's this chatter that's constantly happening, and it keeps driving me nuts. It keeps throwing me off. It keeps distracting me. And we can have this idea that the mind needs to be totally cleared of thought in order to concentrate. And that's just not true. I think that's not very, I don't think that it is a necessary condition at all. It's about how is it that we can create the conditions for the mind to just rest a bit? And also, how is it that we can not care as much about the thoughts? So concentration can still arise even though thoughts are happening. It's just how can they kind of be a little bit more in the background, like a TV is on in the other room. We're trying to study, the TV is on, but it's not glaring right here. It's in another room there, and it kind of becomes background noise. So how is it that we can work towards creating the conditions for shamatha, for a calm, pleasant abiding, while allowing these intrusive thoughts, feelings, sensations, reactivity become a little bit more of a background noise? It becomes like a white noise. Yeah. So this is kind of what I'm looking at, kind of exploring and actually doing today in the meditation. So here is this uh, uh, um, technique taking from Shinzen Young's Unified Mindfulness, the see, hear, feel practice. We're discerning active versus rest. Um, and what this particular practice does, it allows, we're creating the conditions, we're sensitizing ourselves to the activity, but we're also noticing when rest naturally occurs in the mind too. And the more that we can incline ourselves to noticing the rest, it tends to kind of proliferate the rest so that the mind becomes a little clearer. And then all of that energy becomes a lot more available to move back towards the concentration. So some people might say, hey, man, there's all this stuff that says, the Vipassana and the Shamatha, the Jhana and the insight practice, they're separate, don't do them at the same time. So I just kind of want to tease them apart. It's what I call kind of a front waiter, back waiter strategy. Yeah. So I guess for fancier restaurants, sometimes they might have like a two waiter system where the front waiter, that's the person that comes up and is like, oh, can I take your order and everything like that. But then they might have a back waiter that they work with that's, running and getting stuff and probably doing a little bit more of the heavy lifting, while the front waiter is the one that's kind of engaging and schmoozing the table. So the primary focus, yeah, calming the attention on the object, attuning to calm mind, we're creating the conditions for the shamatha that'll incline us into jhana states. And then the secondary, the back waiter, is we'll have this background kind of see, hear, feel practice of active versus rest. Why is that? I was talking in the meditation group this morning about uh, uh, um, Buddhadasa, in his book Heartwood of the Bodhi Tree, talks about the experience of, well, the book is about emptiness, emptying out of self-view, emptying out of um, all the clutter that gives rise to a sense of personality view. And he's talking about it as though you're standing in a lake that is clear. It's crystal clear. You can look down and you can see your feet. You can see the stones there, and there's something very calm, placid about that. Enjoyable about that. And practically speaking, in that calm, clear, clarified place, you can see the fish swimming towards you from a distance. Oh, there's a fish and it's coming towards me. I see it. That's a fish. Okay, hello, fish. I can just kind of step out of the way or what have you. And so that represents, when the mind becomes clear, the thoughts are still going to come up majority of the time. But the more kind of we can make the mind clear and calm, the more we can have a sense of, oh, okay, here comes a thought. And I can relate to it in a way where it's like, okay, I don't need to get engaged with you. So contrasting that to like if we step into the ocean and the water is crazy churning and tons of sand and seaweed are up, and then all these things kind of brush up against your leg and it just feels icky and you just want to run out of there, which is the experience of kind of our mind as we go through the day to day. It is so cluttered and harried and fractured in its attention that it brings up all of this distress and like the fish flopping around on land, just urgency and discomfort and inability to kind of see. So we're calming the attention, and then in the background, kind of quieting the thoughts in a way, or relating to the thoughts in a way that make them a little bit more quiet, less obtrusive. So then eventually we can have this clear lake experience. And then when the thoughts eventually do come back again, we can relate to them in a way. So it's this front waiter on the calm, abiding, back waiter, just kind of working with the subduing of the thought process. So again, there is an actual history of a relationship between shamatha and vipassana working together, really to create the conditions for the awakened mind. So although, we'll be moving into jhana, we'll be peppering a little bit of vipassana into that in order to, bring about the make the thought process less opaque. Yeah. So the twin qualities of vipassana to clear seeing, to the shamatha of the calming and settling. It's a pairing of deep concentration and precise insight together. So we're going to just pepper that into a little bit and then kind of try to work more deliberately into concentration. So tranquility to be tangible and sensory, flavors that have a location and space, durations and time, practice based in a sensory experience. So how is it that we can taste the flavor of concentration, taste the flavor of tranquility, taste the flavor of a calm abiding? These might be little sensations here and there that may be subtle, that may be fleeting, but the more that we can notice them, enjoy them, you know, apply our attention onto them, derive that interest, the pleasure born of our curiosity and interest in the object of focus, that promotes the tranquility, that promotes the calm abiding. Um, and then we're going to shift the practice a little bit to deliberately kind of go into this, um, looking at the active and rest of the mind. Then when we're done with that, we go explicitly back into concentration. So the part of working with the mind, see, hear, feel for those that are new to this method of working. It's just a way of being with the mind and the body. That's all we have when the bell rings and we're just sitting there. That's all we have is the experience of mind and body. So partial awareness in this feeling form of the body, sensations can be active or they can be restful. So the feel rest is relaxation in the body, ease in emotional neutrality. Yeah. So the feel out sensations, the touch sensations of pressure easing or relaxation, that would be feel rest, or a neutrality in the emotional field of the body. Those when we can we notice that when it occurs, yeah, and appreciate that, then that inclines us um, towards ease. And then we can notice from moment to moment some of these sensations are active, and that's okay. How so that we can bring that sense of equanimity towards the active. But then when that subsides, or we can contact the rest and feel space, excellent. See rest. So the see and the hear for no matter how complex, sophisticated, multifaceted our thought process is, there's the element that we see, the images that arise in the mind's eye that's projected upon this mental picture plane. Most people report somewhere around the eyes, the forehead. So the see rest is there ain't no images there. I'm aware of sight awareness. I'm aware of the visual experience, but I'm just looking at the backs of my eyelids or the corresponding sense of brightness or darkness or blankness. That's see rest. But my attention there, then an image arises, some sort of thinking that happens that I see, a fantasy that I see, planning that I see, daydreams, those images. So that would be more the active. So just noticing moment by moment. Oh, okay, now it's active. Now it's restful. Now it's active. Now it's restful. So the more that we can incline ourselves to notice when the moments of rest occur, then great. They tend to proliferate. And then, of course, hear rest. The other aspect of thinking is the auditory component, the internal chatter, the internal commentary, conversations, monologues, internal tunes that occur. Moment by moment, we can have this internal talk, which would be here active, or moment by moment, there might be this absence of internal talk in which it's just quiet, quiet in between the ears. So the more that we can kind of notice, see, the thing is, we're always aware of kind of the active. Yeah, it's just like, oh, this hurts here, and now I'm kind of caught in this commentary and this rumination that's happening. But we're not aware of the gaps. We're not aware of the spaces. We're not aware of those moments where the mind is taking pause because it's less interesting. But if looking at what we're working towards today, if we can just incline ourselves to notice those gaps when the moments where it is quiet, then they just naturally tend to proliferate, extend, and we become less interested in engaging or subtly fueling the active. And so what happens is it's just like this activity begins to quiet down a little bit, and then we start having the experience of it kind of being in the back room. Then we can shift back into shamatha, distinctly working into the calm abiding of our practice, and then kind of begin to attune ourselves to discerning, cultivating our palate to discern the flavors of the jhanic factors. So that's what we're going to be kind of playing around with. So stage one, Shamatha object, noticing the pleasing, calming qualities of the breath. You know, all of these things that are happening here. Um, the vitakka, the vicara, piti, sukha, and um, ekaggata. Even when we're just kind of hanging out with the breath, we can notice these mental factors are at play. Then we'll pause from that. We'll move more into the deliberate kind of insight practice of see, hear, feel, active, and rest to kind of get rid of, calm down this activity a bit, make it a little more transparent. And then then we will then stage 3, go back to the shamatha object. And then, that will be our front waiter. But then we'll still have a little bit of our attention in the background, just kind of working. Okay, just noticing that mental activities happening, but directing a sense of equanimity, viraga, kind of a dispassion, non-interest in it, until this mind becomes less obstructive and then more energy becomes available directed towards cultivating the jhanic factors. So people might be sitting here saying, wow, that's a lot of crazy words and asking me to do a lot of stuff here. I'm not sure if I can do it. Yes, you can. You probably already have, to one degree or another, to moments here and there when in meditation, there are moments of just really being aware of the elements of mind, that which directs your attention, that which sustains your attention, the enjoyment, moments of kind of energy and wakefulness that happen, moments of just hanging out and not being obstructed. These are all things that can be subtle and fleeting, but we've had them on the cushion, off the cushion. And so that all counts as far as I'm concerned in terms of really developing skills. But if we can add a little bit of mindfulness of it, that we're aware of it, that'll help to reinforce, strengthen this palate to discern. And we move from these momentary superficial expressions to more profound. Yeah? It's just a numbers game. Consistency of effort over time will yield the results. So again, we're not needing to suppress the thought, just kind of have it be less of a big deal, just not be put off by it. Okay, so I think that's pretty much what we got for the didactic piece. Before we go um, into the um, meditation practice, does anybody have any questions? I know that was quite a bit of info, but questions before we get into things? Okay, then. Well, let us come to an upright seated posture. Straightening up and settling in. Allowing yourself to have posture where your spine, like a stack of coins, less of effort, more of balance. Just really allowing your body to relax. Let go of any volitionally held tension. And just get a sample of what's the weather right now in the body, what's happening in the body, what's happening in the mind. However, it is that we're bringing our mind and body into this experience is perfectly fine, perfectly all right. Again, as always, we're not going for an A plus, just a D minus. Good enough. It's just about learning, not perfection. And let's turn our attention towards the breath. So, right here, that deciding and moving your attention towards the breath, that's the vitakka. Having your attention settle into or connect to the breath in a sustainable way, that's the vicara. And incline yourself to just notice the breathing, notice the different stages of breath and what are the pleasant, gladdening, and balancing qualities. A few rounds being particularly attuned to the in breath, what is there. And so, as we're paying attention to the breath, there's the pleasing quality of being attuned to and interested in it. That would be a beginning stage of piti in that way. It's that gladdening quality. Next few rounds of breath, let's pay particular attention to tuning to the top of the in breath, that pause between in breath and out breath. Next few rounds of breath, let's pay particular attention to that out breath. What is the pleasant qualities there? Relaxation response, the letting go, tranquility. Whatever way that attending to the breath in this way you feel is kind of attuning you, settling into you where you're really appreciating it. It's more the sukha, a happiness in that respect. Next few rounds of breath, just paying particular attention to that base of the out breath, that pause between exhaling and inhaling. What's available there? Qualities of contentment, slowing down, peace, whatever it is for you. Just noticing, attuning, and appreciating what's available at that stage of the breath for you. Those moments where the mind feels as though it is resting into the breath and there's less obstructiveness, just notice when that happens. It can be subtle, it can be fleeting, that's fine, but it's the ekaggata quality, just the stabilized attention. Just recognize it when it occurs naturally. Okay, good. So as we're attempting to just be with the breath, cultivating its qualities, of this calm abiding, the thoughts may very well be doing their things, getting in the way. So let's move into that second piece where we're deliberately looking at the active versus rest. So again, just play with this. Just use whatever works here. Partial awareness in this feeling form of the body, partial awareness in the seeing component of the mind's eye, attention around your forehead, your eyes, wherever it is you see images. Attention around the ears, internally, where you normally hear dialogue, internally generated talk. Can we be with that? Moment by moment, notice where is your attention drawn into seeing, hearing, or feeling? And is it active or is it restful? That is to say, images that you see, let's see active. But if you're aware of see space and there's nothing there, but you're looking at the backs of your eyelids, let's see rest. Your awareness is brought to hearing and there's internal talk, that's hear active. When you're aware of this hearing consciousness, this hear space, and there's nothing but quiet between the ears, that's hear rest. And in the body, aches, pains, activation, or emotional turbulence, let's feel active, relaxation, calmness, emotional neutrality. Let's feel rest. So free floating between mind and body. You could use that labeling set. See, hear, feel active, or see, hear, feel rest. Might sound something like this. Feel active. See, rest. See and hear rest. See active. Feel active. All rest. So we're contacting, making a label, exploring, accepting, and moving on. So try to stay consistent with the labels again. It's kind of a passive thing. We're just allowing attention to do its thing. Where is it being pulled? When we're hanging out with the breath, our attention is being pulled into thinking. So just allow it to be pulled, but don't drop into the rabbit hole. Just notice if your attention is being pulled into seeing, hearing, or feeling. And just meet that with an acceptance and neutrality, equanimity, and discern, active or restful. And let go. It's okay if we get caught up in the active. That's habit. Just being aware when awareness turns on, that mindfulness kicks in, that brightness, aliveness, and awareness. And then our being caught in the activity falls away and it moves towards rest. The more that this faculty of awareness is bright, the more that we can hang out in the rest states. And then can we just let go of the active and attune yourself just to rest? Just notice when see rest, hear rest, or feel rest is prevalent. Tune to it, connect with it, hang out in it, appreciate it. Whenever it arises, again, it can be subtle or fleeting, but for right now, we're just hanging out in rest states. See rest, hear rest, feel rest. That's it. Might sound like this: see rest, see and hear rest, all rest, feel rest, and so on like that. It doesn't mean that everything's restful. I'm just ignoring the active, tuning myself, prioritizing, noticing the rest when it does reveal itself. Okay, good. So those are the phase two. Now let's just allow that to be in the background. So we're moving into this front weight or back weighter thing. So front weighter, front attention, reconnecting with breath. How does this impact the breath? Just felt in the body, felt in the mental space. Attuning to the pleasant, calming qualities of breath in any way that that supports restfulness and awakeness. So really anchoring your attention into the breath. Vitakka, the application of thought, reconnecting with breath. Vicara, attention anchoring into that breath. The piti is that delight that arises in taking an interest in your activity. The sukha, that contentment or relief that can happen with the mind settling into something. Qualities of ekaggata whenever the mind feels as though it's settling in, able to rest into this activity undisturbed. course, the mind may be doing its thing. So then we have this back waiter strategy, just subtly in the background when it's appropriate. We can just recognize, just see active, hear active, and kind of let it go. Come back into the front activity of being with the breath, and abiding in these shamatha qualities, the jhanic factors. So, like again, standing in the clear lake. Clear lake is whatever clarity, stability, openness that's being experienced. Whenever a thought arises, then maybe we can see it more clearly for what it is, the fish approaching us from afar. That back waiter strategy of just noticing, okay, see active, hear active, letting it go. Then appreciating the rest when it does arise, which folds into this calm abiding. And when possible, lean into that piti sukha, the delight that takes place from being engaged with the object, the contentment, the relief that comes from stabilizing the mind. Really leaning into the piti, the sukha, the delight, and appreciation, more that we can permit, allow that, more that anchors our attention into this activity. ease, everybody. Let me turning off the recording for the Q&A. Okay, so thank you very much, everybody, for all of your practice, for your questions, for your comments, for the conversation. Thank you for your willingness to try on this way of working. So we can end with a dedication of merit. The merits of these acts and other such virtues, may we attain a liberation for the benefit of all beings. We bow before those who have come before us on the path, after us, and to those who walk beside us on the path. Okay, thank you so much for your practice. Hope to see you next time.